All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today, taking the time out of what I'm sure might have been a busy work day for some of you, or a busy day of no classes for the students that are in the room. If you don't know me, my name is Andrew Clifford, and I'm here on behalf of the School of Translation at Glendon College to introduce our two guests that are with us today for our public panel. And by way of framing the discussions that we're about to have, I might begin by quoting renowned baseball player and coach Yogi Berra when he said that the future ain't what it used to be. And so if that can be said of baseball, surely it can be said of translation. And I'm saying this because I'm thinking notably about the financial crisis that started with us in 2008 and that some would say is still with us. Certainly the economic situation for most countries in the global north has changed drastically and possibly for the worst. And it's understandable, I think, that a lot of institutions within the public sector are feeling a bit of a pinch and are looking very closely at the things that they are doing, trying to rationalize, trying to become more efficient, concentrate on core mandates, and in some cases perhaps even shrink the size of some of their operations. And so for students, I think there might be a tendency to look at this and to maybe grimace just a bit, because some students that are listening to us today or that will listen to this later on when we post it on YouTube may be saying to themselves, well, that represents fewer opportunities for me, especially for those students that are in that mindset that all I have to do is flop down a CV and I can walk into that sort of institutional job. Now, I would argue that has never really been the case, and it arguably is not the case anymore. But some people are tending to look at this with a little bit of a negative stance. At the same time, one of the things that I would suggest, I read recently a U.S. Bureau of Labor statistic that said that the growth in the translation sector in the next 8 years was slated to jump by 42%. And that compares to an average of about 13% for most other professions. So we're seeing changes, some of them positive, some of them negative, and clearly all of us, whether we're students or part of the industry stakeholders, we need to be able to step back to understand those changes a little bit better, understand what they mean for us in our sector, and then consequently to strategize about them. And so I hope that the conversation we have today will allow us to do all of those things. By way of introduction, I'll begin on my far right with Ms. Donna Achimov, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Translation Bureau at Public Works and Government Services Canada. Ms. Achimov is no stranger to Glendon. She has been with us before for another event, and she was very warmly received, and I hope you will receive her quite warmly this time around. We, of course, have a very, I think, positive working relationship with the Translation Bureau, engaging with them on a number of fronts. A new face perhaps for us today is Mr. Rytis Martikonis, who is the director of the Directorate General for Translation at the European Commission. And while Mr. Martikonis might be a new face, hopefully he'll become a more familiar one, and we'll have other opportunities to reach out and to network with him and with his colleagues at the DGT in Brussels and elsewhere. All right, so that being said, I'm simply going to turn the floor over to our speakers. The first up is Ms. Achimov. You'll be hearing from her for about 15 minutes, and then we'll switch up and hear from Mr. Martikonis.
Thank you very much. Merci. Merci, Andrew. Mesdames, Messieurs, je suis très contente d'être ici. Mon collègue Anne Rutledge, bonjour. I'm glad that you're here today from ALIA, and Denis Bousquet, ancienne présidente de CITIC, qui sont ici, je pense, avec nous aujourd'hui. Oui, bien sûr. Et Rytis, bienvenue au Canada. He braved weather and time zone differences, and it's great to be here. I love coming here. I'm so impressed with, as I mentioned earlier, your facilities, the energy, and always to see students and faculty. And I'm glad that we're here with a good mix of private sector associations and a good cross-section of people. So one of the issues or one of the challenges in the language industry in Canada today, I'm obsessed about numbers and people and ages and la relève et le besoin d'avoir les jeunes et aussi les personnes avec différentes expériences. Plus tôt cette année, le bureau a fait faire une analyse comparative pour mieux comprendre notre environnement. On a engagé PricewaterhouseCoopers de regarder la façon qu'on gère nos affaires et comment est-ce qu'on peut comparer ça avec les autres endroits. And we've got that study online. It's on our language portal, and I do encourage you to take a look at some of that. It's an open, honest look at everything from how we embrace technology to our productivity and some of our trends, so that's key. So the Canadian language services industry, we're always trying to get accurate numbers, but as an employer, we are estimated to employ about 15,000 translators, interpreters, terminologists, and localization specialists, and those were numbers that we had from 2010. The average age of those in the translation is higher than in any other part of our workforce. 22% of translation workforce is aged 55 or older, as compared to about 15% for the entire workforce. I'm seeing every day, I sign these wonderful notes thanking people for 30, 35 years of service, and many are retiring and taking with them incredible, rich expertise. Approximately 1,000 new translators are needed each year to meet the demand in Canada, not just in the government, to replace retirees, and only about 300 graduate. So those are some numbers that we really need to think about. And the industry is comprised mainly of self-employed workers, and most of those are women. At the Bureau, the majority of our translators, 75% are women, and I'm really paying a lot of attention to that because we are looking at home work-life balance, how we recruit, and what types of working conditions do we want to look at. So employee demographics is interesting for us to keep a look at. Andrew was quite candid in terms of government is changing. Most federal departments and agencies, provincial counterparts, municipalities are all looking at being more efficient and doing things differently. And I would say that holds some challenges, but I think it's some opportunities. Rytis and I were talking a little earlier about the fact that we are limiting, for legitimate reasons, travel. And so what we're doing now is we're really pushing the edge of video conferencing. We're using telepresence and virtual meetings. What does that mean in terms of our skills as facilitators, how we leverage our interpretation colleagues, and how we do a better job at preparing? I know regardless of translation interpretation, many of us find it very frustrating not getting material ahead of time. And what we're finding is video conferencing is forcing us to have that kind of discipline. And again, quality, translated, timely information, and some of the challenges of interpreting across distances when you're not physically in the room, I think has some real opportunity for all of us. We are also seeing a trend to smaller government. The Bureau used to be the main recruiter of translators and interpreters, and we're looking to share some of that with the private sector. And I know that I've spoken to Anne and a few other colleagues in industry associations to look at, can we do, est-ce qu'on peut former les jeunes et avoir les stages, peut-être un peu avec pas seulement le Bureau de la traduction, mais peut-être les stages avec les secteurs privés, les associations, et nous sommes une partie clé, mais pas seulement le seul parti. So we have some opportunities, I think, to work collaboratively to look at how we form and how we work with young people. I would say one of the most interesting trends that I'm paying a lot of attention to is obviously the global realities, being globally connected, and technology. We're seeing a growing demand, a domestic demand for translation services across more than English and French, Spanish, Chinese, German, Russian. The recent census was quite interesting, and I think that all of you here, especially students, should take a read through the recent census, the 2011 census. Plus de 200 langues ont été déclarées comme les langues parlées à la maison ou comme langue maternelle. Presque 6,6 millions de personnes, soit à peu près 20% de la population, ont déclaré parler une autre langue que le français ou anglais à la maison. So that's an interesting trend in terms of other languages other than English and French. And I think with that comes tremendous, what we in Canada embrace in terms of multiculturalism. With that comes the need to import, to export, to have trade relations. And I think what we're going to see is different types of demand for translation. Product label. security, shipping. There isn't a single cargo freight container that comes into this country by air, land, or sea that doesn't have a manifest attesting what contents are inside. These contents come from all over the world. It's translation, it's steady work, it's interesting work, and it's vital to keep our economy going. Yet it may not be the type of work perhaps that you were thinking of embarking in, but however, I think because of our global concerns in terms of security as well as expansion of trade, that these are going to be areas we need to look at. We've talked mainly about the benefits of immigration and cross-fertilization. Sometimes there are risks. We've seen pandemics come about, and what the census has now told us is that our typical warning, public advisory notices aren't necessarily going to work in English and French. And the need to have real-time quality language other than English and French to ensure safety in the population, I think, is going to be critical. And again, it's an opportunity and certainly is a different type of work that's coming about. And I think as well that technology is allowing us to look very differently at how we actually do the work that we do as linguistic professionals. I know from my 18 months in the Translation Bureau that there's been mixed reaction in terms of how we use what we're calling our language ecosystem. We've developed an ecosystem which we're hoping to be leading edge and which we're hoping to make available not only to the public service but to Canadians at large. Memory translation, machine translation, that whole ecosystem from start to finish, looking at quality control, looking at how we manage terminology. We've just launched our first BlackBerry and iPhone app where we've taken Termium, which is our incredibly rich language database, and we've made it available certainly online in terms of our language portal, but now it's available free of charge as an iPhone and BlackBerry app. And we're thrilled to be able to do that because that used to be a tool that was only the domain of a few translators in the Bureau, and it became available across the Bureau into the public service, to Canada, and I know to my colleagues around the world and to citizens of the globe. So we have to look at how we manage technology, and I know that that poses some challenges for us. I encourage all of you as you think about your careers, and I encourage you in the private sector as well, to think about how we can leverage technology, not only to reduce our costs, but speed. That's one of the trends that we're seeing, real-time deliverables in terms of the need to provide information. Citizens are demanding it. We're seeing it in our parliament. What used to be 1 week to turn around committee documents became 48 hours, 24 hours, and in some cases a real push for real-time. Televised, closed captioning. Closed captioning is becoming a huge industry for us. We're just beginning to explore how we're using it. Certainly for question period, we're using closed captioning. Many of the committees now are being closed captioned. And the closed captioning, I think, is incredible because we're able to tap into resources that don't necessarily need to sit in Ottawa. People who do closed captioning can work virtually anywhere. And when I started the discussion, I talked about a female workforce and the demographics and young people. The richness of having talent across this wonderful country and internationally will allow us hopefully to tap into some of those skill sets in using technology, in using a mechanism and a communications means that Canadians are certainly looking for. So what I think holds for the future for some of you in this room, very quickly, I think you have to be open to change. It's easy, it's really easy to say. It's harder to do. I speak from experience. I think you have to be curious. I'm preoccupied in the workforce to see how we've maybe forced people not to be curious. We worry about productivity. We worry about how many minutes, how many documents, what the quality is, what the next job is, and have we eliminated time to be curious, to experiment, to share information, to say, you know, somebody's doing something really interesting in the European Union. Could we be doing that here? Could we leverage that? I encourage curiosity. You're going to have to be diplomats. We have 4 generations in the workforce, and I think that that has wonderful, unique opportunities and it also has some challenges. And I think that coming into a new workforce, bringing in a different perspective and respecting the history and the values that have come in terms of people who have the 30 years, the 35 years of experience, it is incredible richness. But diplomacy and agility, I think, are going to be key. You have to be business savvy. I don't mean to come across as an employer of a sweatshop organization. That's not who I am and what I believe in, but our clients are asking for quality, real time, and they're pushing us to make sure that we're competitive and that we are giving them the best value for money. And there is a tendency to look for the lowest cost per word, and that is the reality. And what does productivity mean? We talked about this earlier, Rytis and I. It means understanding your supply chain. Where do you use the skills of a talented linguist and language expert? Where do you use the translator? I look at my business process and our workflow, and I don't want translators who are highly skilled, highly specialized to be formatting documents. I'll be quite honest. That's a job an important job that has to be done, and I look at the federal budget. When you have a critical document that has to be formatted, graphs, pie charts, those sorts of things, that is quality that has to be taken care of. It doesn't have to be done by the linguistic or the translating expert. A neurosurgeon doesn't do the final stitching and the anesthesia. Everybody has a role to play, and I think coming into the workforce, being in the private sector, you have to realize what that supply chain is and how we leverage it, and how we leverage technology, and the fact that we are getting new business demands. We are editing machine-translated text. I consider that a huge victory in the public service, where we have convinced people that it's important to be bilingual, to be respectful of the people that we're writing for, and to know the difference in terms of when a document has to be reviewed by a professional. And I think that that is an incredible instinct that we want to have in our society in general. People are curious and they want to use machine translation. We should be encouraging that, but we should also encourage that next instinct, and just as we do with lawyers and accountants. I like to do my own income tax, but I really have the confidence when my accountant takes a fast look and finds me money or finds an error. So I think we need to be mindful of some of that as well. And I think at the end of the day, having the ability to understand our clients. I know that we are in a profession where sometimes it's very difficult to say to a client, well, I can't exactly do what you're looking to do. And I'll give you one really good example. Our client department in Parks Canada is wanting to introduce a very, very different vocabulary, a different approach to dealing with a new generation, sometimes of new Canadians who are coming in, encouraging people to use the park system. They're tweeting, they're on Facebook, and they're using language that is resonating with young people, which doesn't maybe resonate with the type of work that we've traditionally done. And you have to listen to the client and understand what they're looking to do. And you know what? Part of our business, cabinet ministers are making major press announcements and are tweeting in real time afterwards. We're dealing in 146 characters, and we're interpreting tweets almost in real time. And so I think that those are important new areas. We're exploring, we're learning, we're running a little bit with scissors, but I think that this is a profession that is certainly adaptable, and I'm very encouraged by what I see, and I'm hoping that you will continue to be curious and encouraged as well, and I look forward to any of your questions. Thank you for your enthusiasm, and thank you for your interest. Merci.
Mr. Martikonis, the floor is yours.
Okay, let's stop here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for inviting me here. I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity to be in the environment which is full of curiosity. I mean, where else if not at the university, where to find things that Anne was saying. I mean, this is pleasure, this is privilege. I'm also on the way to Mountain Conference. That's why I cross Atlantic. Because I think this is important on both sides of Atlantic to be able to compare how do we translate, how do we nourish multilingualism, how do we operate in sometimes two, sometimes many more languages. And that's what I'm going to do now. I mean, first to give you some background things of the multilingualism in the European Union, and then some things about Directorate General of Translation, which I'm heading, and how do we do certain things. I started here, I mean, this is the official languages scheme. Yeah, I mean, it has been developing with quite a speed over 60 years. But my starting question, I mean, and I was thinking about the students, sort of to a simple entrance question. I mean, how many languages, which were the founding languages of the European Union? I mean, it tells, but if you cannot read, it would be better. I mean, but give me an answer.
French, Dutch, German, French, English.
Luxembourg, which language it would be?
Benelux.
Luxembourg language. That yes, there is one, but it's not an official language. It's not an official language. They have not asked that yet. But what?
Luxembourgish.
No, it's not. It's not among the. It's not among the 23 official languages. But I'm giving this as a reminder, as a historical reminder that more like 60 years ago, I mean, the 6 countries started European communities at that time with 4 languages, which would seem rather, how to put it, awkward today, or they would not spring into mind. It was Dutch, Italian, French, and German, because Belgium and Luxembourg did not require or did not call for extra languages. And then the story developed. I mean, you see in different years, enlargement after enlargement, we are arriving at language 24. Croatia to join the European Union next year, meaning that all the official business of the European Union is conducted or has to be translated into 23, soon 24 languages. That is to say that when I look at the Canadian experience, I mean, I feel that our sister brother organization, I mean, Translation Bureau that Donna is heading, is doing very much the same. Just sometimes we have to multiply it by 10, by 12, then we can divide it by knowledge, by expertise, but basically the diversity, linguistic diversity, managerial diversity is quite different. This is the legal basis of again of more or less 60 years ago, but that was one of the very first regulations in the European Union, European Economic Communities at that time, which was stating that all the documents of the European Union should be drafted in the official languages. And then enlargement after enlargement, this number grew. The current treaty of the European Union also states explicitly that citizens have the right to address the bodies of the European Union in his or her, in their national languages, and to receive a reply. So basically, this is to underline the very basic principle of democratic legitimacy, of transparency, and I think that's what language does. It goes into the core of identity, and the European Union by no means is trying to assimilate this. On the contrary, it has an obligation to nourish it and to support. Hence, the translation services, the translation and interpretation. But here I'm to distinguish. I'm talking here for translation because interpretation is being run in parallel. I mean, the numbers are also quite impressive. But this is to give you a picture of 7, 8, 9 major European Union institutions. It starts with the Parliament, with the Council, with the Commission, Court, Bank, Central Bank, Court of Auditors. Each and every European Union institution has its own translation service. Here you have the numbers that altogether in the European Union institutions we are employing. We are something like 4,400 translators. This is for good reason. I mean, they're all in-house bodies or in-house translation services, and reflecting the legislative process of the European Union. When what starts in the Commission is as a legislative initiative, it is translated in the Commission. It moves to the European Parliament and European Council for deliberation. It is translated then in those institutions. So this reflects the legislative logic. Interpreters are in the area of 800-900 of interpreters for these institutions. The DGT, Directorate General for Translation, the place where I come from, the place which I joined a couple of years ago. We are altogether 2,500 of staff, of which 1,800 are translators, meaning that the rest are the support services, IT, human resources, communication, and so on. We're divided. I mean, we're perfectly split. I mean, in two locations, in Brussels and in Luxembourg. That's again one of the features of the European Union, that the institutions are being scattered in different places. But we are in two places. And then when Donna is talking about video conferencing, for example, this is a daily reality for myself or for my directorate, because to have a unit meeting, for example, I mean, over or across Ardennes, you do have quite a bit of that. So we are translating legislation. I mean, that's the core activity of ours, and it makes up to 80%. Up to 80% of our translation is legislation or legislative packages, whatever it is consisting of. It might be impact assessment, it might be some additional analysis, summary, but our core activity is legislation. We do translate resources, allowing also some policy documents, let's just say some communication material. I will say about this in a while. Again, when it comes to communication, this is increasingly important. Going online, web. I have it in the next slide, which is also a slide of challenges. I could easily subscribe, but with the full realization how challenging it is about many things that Donna was saying. Doing more with less. We're trying to find an answer. Okay, let's try to do it better. How to be smarter. How to rein in a evolving translation demand. And of course, the first task for me here is trying to curb the demand, meaning that to be more targeted, to be more selective, and not to take sort of letter by letter the original sort of historic regulations, that not everything should be translated into all languages. That's the basic challenge, how to be selective, how to make sure that, I'm not giving here a real example, but basically, the logic would be that we might be trying to see, okay, let's say in Czech Republic, what is the relevance of the maritime the legislation? I mean, no sea, no fish in Czech Republic, or the desert regulation, for Finland and or Lithuania. So that's one thing. Another thing is that we do believe in our department that quality of original, the conciseness, the structure of our text, of our legislation is part and parcel of a better regulation agenda. I mean, if we say we have to legislate better, linguistic quality, structural, editorial quality must be part and parcel of that. Still, a few words on evolution of demand. Web and online. Web and online is growing quite fast. The thing that we have to handle is that it's not a legal obligation. It's not a legal obligation, stricto sensu, but it's a clear policy imperative. The people are using web. I mean, the accessibility of it is of utmost importance. We are investing quite a bit into that. Online services is another area which is growing. The most recent example on which we're working, for example, with the Directorate on Consumer Protection is online dispute resolution. And that's a platform which our colleague in Consumer Protection Directorate are elaborating, establishing a platform, online platform for settling the sort of smaller scale disputes. How do you do that across the borders, across languages? You need a translation. You may automate quite a bit of that, but what do you do with the language pairs which are not, German and Finnish are not easiest for the machine translation? You need human. Even for best of machine translation, if you want to really settle, I mean, if you want to sort of nearly a court settlement kind, you want to be sure that, I mean, since we are talking your money, your 5,000 euros and my 5,000 euros, you want to make sure that a human touch and certification is at the end of that. So online services are developing. We are trying to contribute to this. But again, like Donna was saying, with a mix of sort of fit for purpose things, machine translation, human translation, post editing, etc. Again, I mean, machine translation and computer assisted tools, CATs, they are also part and parcel of our agenda in efficiency gains. But we are conscious about the limits of those, but it's important that we are embracing it. We are exploring the limits. We are using quite a bit of that. Donna was talking about succession planning. It's a challenge also for us. In our directorate, we will not be bigger in next 5 years. We are cutting up to 10%. I mean, we will be up to 10% fewer. We are looking into the best ways and means in transfer of knowledge. How do we develop manuals? How do we develop working methods? How do we train people, sort of put next to each other those that are retiring with those that are coming in? This is clearly a big task for us. Identifying talent pool and bringing it up, that's also part of this difficult sort of climbing up the rocks. For the students are not only the job opportunities. I mean, we are employing, I mean, we are recruiting 50, 60 translators every year across the different languages. You have the categories in front of you as a permanent job, as contract staff for some specific things that we need for a time. We also have trainees, but in most cases, all three major categories are related to the EU citizens. I mean, we are working sort of in order to come to us, to work for us. You need to have EU nationality. But for training, for exchange, we do have some possibilities for that. And years ago, we had an exchange with the Bureau there were colleagues coming from Canada also to our place. What can Commission offer you? I mean, this is again for the students. I think this is an exciting place to work. I mean, for those who like European integration, for those who are interested in European affairs, this is the place where you really serve the mission. I mean, it's a political project. It's going through the rough times. We can talk about the Nobel Peace Prize, but I never take it, or I would not take it as an sort of guarantee for the future and not an invitation for complacency. But it's clearly of political importance. We're proud that the professional environment is of top class. I think the colleagues there, they have acquired sometimes the knowledge that it is unprecedented and unique in the European Union institutions, and sometimes you hear translators exchanging with the negotiators. I mean, translators, for example, of the trade agreements. Somebody translating trade agreements for 20 or 30 years, I believe, has a thing or two to tell to those sometimes newcomers to the European Commission, and fighting most sophisticated battles in trade, be it with Andean, ASEAN, Chinese or Indians. Is scope to shape? Yes. I mean, the point here is that the career in the European Commission, if once you join the translation directorate, is not limited only to translation. We encourage the mobility. We encourage possibilities of colleagues to go around and to see other departments. And we do have a number of colleagues who are benefiting from that quite a bit. Multicultural environment, training opportunities are there. Just a quick word on outsourcing. We would not be able to do everything ourselves. 25 to 30% of our work is outsourced. Naturally, then we work with the industry, with the 24 national markets, but it also involves individuals and companies. This I could leave for questions, exchanges. I mean, again, Donna was mentioning a number of these things on evolution of the profession, moving and finding right balances between translation, revision, management of projects, tools, IT. This is very much ongoing. This is very much a trend. But seeing Andrew standing, I would leave this for exchange. But I would finish with a number of things, also for discussion that we are developing, and seeing colleagues like Anne here, I mean, who was with us in Brussels for the industry conference. We are making best effort to reach out there. We are developing also the Masters of Translation Network. Then if there is interest, we could exchange of that. I mean, it's a consortium, it's a network of 54 translation programs among the EU universities, and Andrew was learning about that as well. We do support translation studies with a limited means, but my idea there is to invite as much as possible of research into our laboratory, so to say. I mean, with volumes like ours, with numbers of translators like ours, I always invite researchers, universities to come to our place to apply different things in translation research. So I could expand on this if you are interested. So thanks for this, and I hope we would have a chance to exchange on this. Thank you.
Just before we open things up to a question and answer period, wanted to give each of our panelists a chance to maybe respond to things that the other had said, or to expand on ideas that they had mentioned. So, Ms. Achimov, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Fascinating in terms of sometimes we're being daunted by two official languages and the complexity of 24 and introducing new languages. I guess one of my key observations is with new countries coming on board and new demands that you do have, you're welcoming translators and interpreters from different countries, different organizations. How do you look at quality and some of the standards and getting people up to speed quick enough in terms of being productive and in meeting the quality requirements that you have? I was very struck as we have the same preoccupations on legislation, making sure that we have quality. And who do you get to review all of these language combinations to ensure that you have that legislative quality that you pride yourself on?
This is a question of real professional and something on which we're working quite intensely. But by now, we have gathered quite an experience with a sequence of enlargements. I mean, the Big Bang was in 2004. In 2004, when 10 countries joined. I mean, that was a real Big Bang. It never starts from scratch. I mean, there is always a lengthy pre-accession period. That's when and where the acceding countries have to translate the acquis. If you want to join the European Union, the first task is to accept, to transpose the acquis, the body of the European legislation which had been adopted before you. So you start working then, you start working with terminology, needless to say. You work in training. But so at the moment when you arrive for membership, you do have the body of translators and interpreters, and you also have translated by now something like 60 or 70,000 pages of the European Union legislation. So that is the preparation which lays the foundation for the subsequent operation. And then, I mean, when after the Big Bang of 2004, then Romanian and Bulgarian coming a couple of years later. Now Croatian accession seems like the smoothest of operation, both in preparing the tools, building the workflows, and the training and recruitment. And recruitment, that's also part and parcel of our operation. Recruitment is being done in the European institutions by one central office to all the departments and to all the areas. I mean, whether you need a lawyer, economist, or translator, you put your request to that body, and then they are the real experts in recruitment. We define the terms of references. They organize the translation. I mean, they organize the recruitment, and that is true both for the accession, but then also every year. I mean, we do have competitions. We do have competitions for languages which we need. So for this year we had. For this year we had Irish. I mean, the interesting thing. I mean, we can talk about Irish, being recruited and being developed as an official language, but also it's English, French, German that is coming also for next year. But concordance, I mean, I don't want to occupy all the time. Concordance, it's a great challenge. Concordance along the 23 languages. In that respect, our databases, our we call it IATE. I mean, this is the mega dictionary of ours. I think it's a state-of-art point of reference where you have each and every term in 23 languages, and this is part of our quality officers, also task, quality officers, terminology officers, which are making sure that the same term is translated the same way, because at the end of the day it has a very clear legal implication, since EU law is directly applicable, interpreted by the courts, etc.
Thank you.
Great. At this point in time, I might open things up to the people that are gathered here.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments that you'd like to put to either one of our panelists? Here in front, please.
Hi, my name is Joan Schneer. I'm a certified translator with ATIO and ATA, English, Spanish, Spanish, English. And this question is for Ms. Achimov. I was dismayed, but not surprised, at a comment you made about clients wanting the best price for or best value for money and the lowest price and that sort of thing. I've been in the business for 15 years. I have not ever been able to raise rates in 15 years. As a matter of fact, I've seen rates go down continually. I lecture to a class of business translation students at one of the universities here, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to be enthusiastic and to be able to promote the industry as something that young people these days would want to go into and could make a decent living from. So I would like you to speak to this and to what the future of the translation industry is in Canada, and what the possibilities are for making a decent living without, I mean, I understand machine translation is the way of the future, but it seems to me that our profession, which is a profession, and we have tons of education on par with lawyers, you know, and yet we charge, you know, pitiful rates, and it seems to me like our work is very similar to people who work on assembly lines.
Joan, I appreciate your candor, and you know, I'm an optional service, not mandatory in government, so I'm facing it right off the bat. My rates can never compare, and nor should I be competing with the private sector, but I have a highly paid, unionized workforce, fixed costs that I don't have a flexible workforce, so I'm stuck very much as you are, and I'm trying to have the right ratio. I think we are seeing the war of the lowest dollar, and I'm seeing bids coming in where suppliers are not only lowballing rates, but lowballing rates and guaranteeing them for 5 years. So that's the challenge. We know that India and China are fast becoming competitors in terms of lowest cost per word, and we know that people are using machine translation. I think the future is, as I had mentioned, the fact that we do have highly qualified people with integrity and specializations, and we have to think about what are some of the new business niches coming in. I think the work will be different. It has to be different, not just for the federal government, but in the private sector. Never would we have thought that Government of Canada ministers, provincial ministers, premiers, municipal officials on Facebook, social media. This is incredibly an interesting trend, the way that citizens are wanting to engage with their government. So how do we add value added? I think that there are opportunities for us to add value added, especially those of you in the room who are living and understanding some of the trends in social media. I also think in terms of some of the work that I mentioned that may not be glamorous, but the fact that this country is dependent on exchange and trade, and the fact that everything that comes in and everything that's exported, if you're exporting a product, health and safety, if you're exporting children's car seats or a food product, it has to be translated in the language of the country that is bringing these goods in. I think that that is incredibly important work and quality work that has to continue. I just think the work is going to be different. When we look at the last census and we have 200 different language combinations, there's health, there's safety. We're seeing we were talking earlier in Ontario, real-time interpretation over the phone for medical issues for many different languages, signage in hospitals, instructions that now are no longer just in English and French. I think that there's lots of opportunities. We just have to think and be ready about how we do things differently. And what I would like to do in the Bureau is have the open dialogue with industry associations, businesses such as yourself, and students to figure out, what's that right approach? How do we think about paying structures, fee structures? What do we charge for new media? How do we measure quality where we're all in agreement and where we have a level playing field and where we can be profitable? So I think it's going to evolve, and I think the experience in this room and certainly across the country and internationally will help shape what that future is.
All right. At the back, please.
Yes, hi. My name is Louis Hayes. I'm a freelance translator. I've been working in French-English translation for over 20 years. During that period, my primary clients, I should mention my wife and I work together. My primary client has been Translation Bureau. It's always been over 80% of my workload. Now, I have noticed in the last year or two that there has been a fairly substantial drop in work volume, and this is what I'm hearing from other people, other freelancers that I know. And so just listening to your comments, I'm just wondering, we've been kind of trying to figure out exactly what this drop in volume is due to, whether it's just general cutbacks across the federal public service, whether perhaps there's been changes in rules about what gets translated and what doesn't get translated, or technology. You mentioned technology. And another thing we've heard about is bundling of contracts, where it's traditionally been that contracts were sent out based on language combination of French and English, English and French. Now I understand there's been some bundling where both types of translation are bundled into one contract and going to one company, large company, rather than being split up into these smaller contracts that we've traditionally seen. I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Well, I'll just speak very quickly to that, and not want to take the time away from our wonderful guest here. But part and parcel is, as government programs are reduced or eliminated, we don't have the need for the same types of volumes of translation. I have a fixed workforce, so it's very difficult. My desire is to shift what we make inside and expand quite significantly what we purchase from the outside. I just can't keep resources that are paid idle while I outsource, so I'm in that adjustment period right now. Many of our colleague organizations are outsourcing on their own and are not doing what we're doing. So it's much easier for an organization that's not in the linguistic business to just say, look, I want to go to one big supplier. And that's clearly what's happening. I think that's a trend that's going to continue. People want certainty of supply, and I think there's an opportunity to form alliances and cooperatives where you can join forces and try and bid on larger contracts. But we're seeing that trend more and more in terms of people who have choices and how they choose to buy.
And perhaps on that note, I might just ask Mr. Martikonis to whether you have any thoughts. I mean, I know a little bit about how some of your work gets contracted out, the necessity that you must have, obviously, to deal with a larger player who's able to offer services with multiple languages.
No, look, I'm perfectly fine to listen to the exchange, because the questions are exactly, if we were in Europe, these would be exactly the same sort of questions which we are handling. So I can recognize the narrative, but in the Commission we do both. we have possibilities we take both individuals and bigger companies. So we're trying to keep a mix, and for the moment we have for each language a good number of translation companies and individuals, and we do what we call a dynamic ranking. Sort of, if the top company is not available, then we go to another one down, and so on. So we have been historically, let's say over the last 5 years, we have been expanding the outsourcing. Yeah? So let's say from the 20% to 25%. Now we are in 27, perhaps moving to 30% of outsourcing. We're looking also in more structured ways. How to build a more structured relationship with the companies, meaning that we would be able to share the more of reference material, sort of the terminology, etc. So to increase the quality to the extent possible. So in that there would then be a need to sort of to revise after we receive the text. But for the moment we do revise quite a bit.
How do you, both of you, balance off the demand for quality against the obvious demand? I hear it all the time as a freelance, as what I'm doing now, and from you when you're talking here now. Balance off quality against the demand for speed. Because what I'm hearing is, real time, give it to me now, I want it immediately. You're not leaving time for thinking, you're not leaving time for linguistic research, language research, terminological research. These are two, at some point something's got to give. What do you also then expect from your translators on a daily basis? Let's put it like that as well. So quality versus speed.
Very difficult generalization to make. Very difficult to say what do I expect from all the translators. And the selectivity is the challenge. How to be selective, how to gear sort of fit for purpose logic, and how to focus on things, how not to compromise on translations that are of top political or top legal importance. Yes, and that's the area where we say sort of compromises should be limited and the quality should prevail. You're right, Donna was referring to this. Once we talk with our departments, different departments of the Commission, for them the timeliness is also quite an important, if not to say quintessential, element of quality, because this is part of the procedural requirement that if a text, if a piece of legislation is to be adopted by the government, by the College of Commissioners, it should be in this or that number of languages. So for the departments, this is, and they have this understanding, and that's part of our discussion, that's part of our fight, one could say. The image is that, okay, give us any text at now, and then we will be able to perfect it and to bleed it and to finalize it afterwards. We need it for this Wednesday because the government meeting is on Wednesday. It's imperative. I perfectly realize the difficulty of balance, difficulty of compromise. And I must also admit that sometimes we do compromise quality over speed. But for the top political priority, that's where we focus, and we will say no compromise on. There are things which are not for compromise. Laws, political speeches, major announcements. I mean, these are on the top of the agenda.
So you would be prepared in those circumstances to give the translator a little bit more time?
More translators.
More translators.
That would be big, because sometimes the time is political. Time is politically defined. It means that if you have 24 hours, it means you have 24 hours. The best you can do is to allocate 3 translators instead of 1.
Then you need coordination and editing.
Exactly. Yes.
We just very quickly, we leverage our time zones. We haven't been in the past, but we have very talented people working in every part of the country. And you know what, we do a crisis extremely well. And I'm just saying, can we take the anatomy of what we do in a crisis and put it in our day-to-day work stream? We leverage our contractors, we leverage our in-house resources, the time zones. We rely on quality terminology so that if we have to parse a document out to 10 or 20 people, that they're all working with the same terminology, and we work with speed, and we understand that sometimes a law, a regulation has to come into effect, and we have to leverage time zones.
All right, I'm just conscious of the time. I think maybe we have the opportunity for 2 more questions, perhaps. I'm going to go to the back first, and then we'll come over here. So the lady in blue, yes.
Hi, I'm Vivian Ship. I'm a freelance translator with Ship & Associates. I've been for many years. And I wanted to ask the Director General in Brussels. Do you, it's a two-pronged question. Do you outsource, when you outsource your documents to freelancers or in fact to any outsource source, do you also have like the federal, Canadian federal government does, do you have a sort of an auction where you send off a request for a document and then to a number of people who are on some list, who are suppliers on some list? I'm not too sure how it works. I receive these sometimes. And then you retain the lowest bidder. And then for the quality assurance that you perform in-house, do you also charge penalties at an hourly rate that's your in-house hourly rate?
Okay. The first part of the question is, no, we have an established list, and we start with the sort of first company to which we send the text. I mean, if that company or individual says, no, I'm busy at this time, I mean, then we go to another one. I mean, so it's not an auction type of thing. And penalties, yeah, I mean, they are in the rules, so to say. They are foreseen, but it's rarely that we have to resort to that. And as I was saying, we do check the quality quite a bit. I mean, we still revise quite a bit in-house. Yeah. What was sort of what were you looking for?
Will you penalize your supplier then, at your discretion?
Because basically the penalty will also work next time. I mean, if the feedback, I mean, from the translator is sort of that the translation was not good, then you would not be sort of getting the first call next time.
You don't unilaterally deduct
No.
the cost of your
All right, over here.
Thank you very much for your talk. I think it was very interesting. My name is Alexa Papadopoulos. I'm a master's student here, and I've been a freelance translator for about 8 years. I actually have a question. I'm curious to know about native languages. I don't know if you go by this rule of people have to translate into their mother tongue, or if that's changing. I'm curious to know how that's been through the years and what the standard is right now.
Still, the native speakers are prevailing, but the rules of competition in the European Commission says that you have to pass the competition in that language. So if your level of knowledge of a language is such, I mean, in theory, yes, you can work in another department, but not your mother tongue. But for the moment, it would be rather exceptional. It's simply by the fact, not by regulation, but by the reality. Yeah.
Yes, same. Yeah, very much.
All right, I might indulge to take one, possibly two last questions. So, Kim?
Regarding succession planning, you want to recruit in the student. Now, from my perspective, I find students when they come are very green. If you're using them as freelancers, how do you give them feedback in order for them to grow as a translator? When they first come out of school, there's a lot they still have to learn. I'd like to know how you actually provide feedback so that they can actually grow in their own career.
Oh, so that's why, I mean, the best training that and the best practices that we can see in our place, for example, is exactly when the newcomers join the organization and then they learn with the more experienced translators. That's the best. As to the feedback to the freelance, it's structurally inbuilt. I mean, it's inbuilt. We have to provide the feedback. And to be frank, this is where we have to also to invest more, because giving a feedback also takes time and energy, etc. This is actually one of the to say internal pressures which we are trying to mount, to say if we want the freelance market to mature, if we want to build, again, the more structured relationship, we have to invest more in the feedback. Because some of the feedback is, okay, we correct the text and we don't explain and we just go on. Huh? But in terms of training, nothing is better than having a translator working next to an experienced translator. And normally we say that in 2 years or so, I mean, you have the full. You need a couple of years.
Yes.
Couple of years from a graduate coming or a newcomer coming into the organization, and then sort of
I
achieving.
was under the impression you want to do less of that and just pick up more freelancers. So we need to recruit them in. You're going to need better feedback, I think.
It's an issue. It's an issue. It's not difficult. I mean, it is difficult. It's not easy to sort of to spend time and explain. Again, we have some cases once you deal with companies, you don't know the individual. Yeah? You give a feedback in an electronic form, and you're not sure whether you are reaching out to somebody or it just rests somewhere in the virtual area. So that's why we are thinking. I mean, we're not there yet, but we are thinking about elaborating part of our contracts to be retainer. I mean, to go to retainer contracts that we would promise, and we would fix a portion, a volume, to a company, and that would allow us. That's what I basically mean when we say more structured. You know, then we say, okay, 10,000 pages per year. And then we think that we would know better each other. We would invest in this. The quality of the product would be better. But for the moment, our rules are favouring sort of a blank auctioning. Sort of, you have a framework contract, you have a winner, and you stay then for 3 or 4 years like that. But we are in the process of review.
Anything to add from the Canadian perspective?
No, I would say echo the same thing. I mean, we do a lot of work, and we have been in terms of training students. We can't be the sole trainers anymore, so I think we need to have a dialogue in terms of how we work with private sector and, as I said, associations and ourselves. It's important. It's an early investment. Young people and new people in the profession are not immediately productive. But it is doing the different types of work, and it is getting the feedback. And our challenge as well, just like Rytis said, is we provide feedback, and we're hoping that it gets to the right individual, but it is very time-consuming and costly as well. So it's a challenge, and an admitted challenge.
All right, one final question.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Martikonis, and it's perhaps more of an economic and political question, because with I'm wondering, first of all, what your annual budget would be in euros and what that would work out to per capita, and whether the cost of translation services in the European Union is considered a major political issue or a minor one, or is it a political issue at all? And then there's a follow-up to that. I mean, English seems to be becoming more and more of an international language, and I know that's a politically sensitive question both in this country and in Europe. And to what extent, with 23 different national languages, to what extent would there be pressure to just move towards English as, a common language and place less emphasis on translating 23 into another 22?
There are many questions in there. No, but it's a long-standing topic. Look, to start from the political answer on the cost, or sort of it's for the moment it costs about 1 billion euros, 1 billion euros per year. The whole translation operation. Then when we say per capita, we say okay, there are 550,000 million Europeans. So it ends up to something like less than 2 euros, 2 euros per person of translation. Then and then that's where we split with some colleagues, because some colleagues say this is a cup of coffee and it's nothing. I belong to those who say it's a cup of coffee, and that's quite a bit, because you have to put that cup of coffee next to a cup of tea for this, and then a cup of that for that, and a plate for this. So it does cost, but I think this is a bearable cost for another part of your question, which is about democracy. I mean, which is about legitimacy of the project. And I don't see how, in all the efficiency of that, and even in the recognized reality that English is the main drafting language of the European institutions. I mean, 70% and more of texts are being drafted in English. But I don't see how the end destination. Now, once we talk, laws for Finland, Portugal, or Greece, to be accepted in one language or in reduced version. So, yes, English is spreading. English is there, and you would be also among those who would say that English suffers because of that. Yes, it's and part of our campaign, I mean, about the quality of originals is about improving of English and improving sort of and using the editorial services, etc., etc. So English is not improved by this sort of globalization, but then on the other hand, I think democracy does have a cost, and we are still affording. I mean, we can and we shall be able to pay that cost.
I totally agree in the democratic freedoms, and in Canada it's official languages, it's part of our culture, it's in our laws, it's an obligation, but it's more than an obligation, and what we're trying to do is enable a public service that is able to communicate respectfully with each other as well as with Canadians. And that's one of the reasons why, if the reaction is for people to use machine translation in their other language and use a professional such as people from the Bureau or freelance companies, I think that is an incredible sign of people wanting to know and to express themselves in the other language. And I embrace that, and I support communicating in that way. We're all under the gun to watch for efficiencies, and I think, again, it's the curiosity and being in a university environment and recognizing the talent that's here, both the experienced talent and the upcoming talent, where I think we can find solutions in the future to make it not only just affordable, but culturally very relevant. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express some thanks on behalf of the School of Translation. First of all, to all of you for coming here today in what I'm sure is a very busy day of work or non-school, as I mentioned earlier. But please join me as well in thanking our two guests for joining us here today, traveling a great distance to talk to you about some very interesting topics. So thank you very much.